Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. So I was recently at the Soul Leadership Retreat in Florida the other week, and every table that I went to, probably 3/4 of them all said they want a guest on podcasts this year. Some of them have dabbled in it, some of them haven't started, but it was definitely a strategy that they wanted to really amplify this year. But it sounded like they were really stuck on how to get on shows. And so they were saying they don't know if they should speak to an agency. They didn't know where to start. They didn't know how to find shows to guest on. And so I thought to myself, I should do a podcast episode on how to get booked on podcasts and where to go to find the shows that are a good fit for you. So I'm going to go over 3 main options, give you some great tools and resources and some tips along the way. So the first way that you can get booked on podcasts is, of course, to do it yourself. Yes, it's free, but it is more time consuming. Absolutely. So you can easily pitch yourself on different shows. So how do you research podcasts? So you can do some research online for looking for the podcasts that are in your niche. So you can look on Apple Podcasts, right? You can look on Spotify, Listen Notes, YouTube. So you can search for like different topics, different genres, different categories to try to find some podcasts that are aligned with your expertise. You can look on social media, see what comes up on your feed, see what shows that you see in those social posts and reach out to them. You can look in Facebook groups. There are so many different places where you can find different podcasts that are out there. Secondly, you can leverage your network. So we all have some great peers, maybe shows that you've already guested on. Maybe they know other hosts that you would love an introduction to. So don't be afraid to use that network and email them or message them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw you were a guest on this amazing show. I would love an introduction to be on their show as well. Do you think you'd be able to do that for me? So don't be afraid to kind of reach out to some of the contacts that you know in LinkedIn, Instagram, email, and so forth. You can also join various podcasting communities and networking groups. I know for me, I'm a part of quite a few podcast groups within Facebook. There is She Podcast. I can't remember the names right now, but there is, if you search, there's podcast guest collaborations. So there are a ton of different Facebook groups where that's all it is people talking about podcasts. And sometimes they'll have posts where, hey, if you're looking for a guest, post today. Hey, if you're a guest looking for a show to be on, share who you are, your one sheet, and what you do and what you talk about. They give you that opportunity. Some podcast groups are literally just about connecting the host with the guest. So someone just types in a post and says, hey, I'm looking for a guest that has an expertise in this, 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 and this, and this. So of course you can keep an eye out for that and then DM with them, right? Same thing on LinkedIn. There are LinkedIn groups as well, so you can search for podcast-related groups in your industry. There is Clubhouse still, Twitter Spaces, Instagram Threads. If you see people asking, hey, does anyone know someone that can come on my podcast to talk about YouTube, Facebook ads, whatever it is, and that's your area of expertise, don't be afraid to, raise your hand and say, that's me, I'll DM you and send you some information. And again, with your network, you could also say, hey, I'm really looking to focus on guesting on shows. Here is my expertise. Hopefully they know that already, but you can say if you're in any of the groups and you hear someone raising their hand wanting a guest that is an expert in that industry, I would love it if you could tag me. So don't be afraid to ask for help from your network. Now, here is the key part, and that is the follow-up. Have a system, have a schedule, a process, and a way that you are tracking your results. So what I mean by that is have a spreadsheet, as an example, with where you've pitched, who you've pitched, what the show is. Did you hear back? Did you reach out to them on Facebook? Was it email? Because honestly, if you do all this reach out over a couple of weeks, I guarantee you 3 weeks later, you won't remember like half of them. And then when someone does reply back, you're like, oh, dang, what was that podcast? Who are they again? So it can just get really super confusing. And this way as well, you have a way to follow up to see if, people are busy. Hey, making sure you got my email, blah, 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 blah. So you just want to make sure that you follow up. And then tracking, again, that follow-up, what your answer was, did you get booked, and what was the result? So if you have that kind of a system, and maybe, again, with your process and scheduling, that you have Tuesday mornings where you do all the pitches. Maybe Thursday morning, you follow up. So if you don't put that in your calendar, you're going to do a whole bunch one week, and then a month is going to go by, and then you're going to be inconsistent. And before you know it, 3 months have gone by and you haven't guested on a show. So please have a system, a process, and make sure that you are tracking. Now, before you start pitching, I want to make sure that you do your due diligence, especially within the phase of doing that research for the shows. Remember, you don't want to guest on a podcast just for the sake of guesting on a podcast. You want to make sure that it's going to put you in front of the right audience, the type of people that are your ideal avatar, and give you some reach as well. So if it's not a fit, don't commit, as my friend Nancy Jutton always says. So think about these variables. Do they have a podcast? Is it current, is what I mean? Do they have an active audience? Have they been doing it long? Is it only like a few episodes in, or have they been doing it for a year? Do they distribute to all of the podcast directories? Do they share it on their social? Do they email their list? Some don't. Some have it up on Spotify and iTunes, and that's it. So you'll have like a little bit of visibility. It kind of depends on their show, obviously. But do you want that reach in social media, email, all the other directories? So something to consider. What style of podcast do they have? Some podcasts only talk about stories, your journey, your human experience, so to speak. So if you are guesting on podcasts to grow your business, and your business is about Facebook ads, that's not going to be a fit for you. Sure, it might get your name out there, but anyone that listens to that episode is not going to know what you do, how you're a solution, what you're an expert at. So it's not going to serve your bigger goals. You really do have to think about your why. And some podcasts, honestly, do mostly solos. So you just kind of want to dot your I's and cross your T's before you reach out, right? Do you like their personality, their energy? Do you think you'll get along? Do you think you'll have a really natural, comfortable conversation with them? I have made this mistake, and I've had a guest on my show. I've been a guest on other shows where it just feels awkward, and it didn't feel like there was good banter back and forth, and just the energy, it wasn't right. So you really have to think about that energy and personality beforehand. Who is their audience? This is so important. If their podcast is serving, seniors looking for a new lease on life, and your expertise is serving new moms, clearly there is no point in wasting your time or theirs to get on that podcast, no matter how many downloads they have, no matter how big the audience. That is super critical. Now, don't discount them though if they are a good potential fit in regards to being a partner or collaboration. So they may have a smaller audience, but maybe they have a great community. They've got a great membership base. They have a great set of clients that are your ideal client, and you serve differently. So I'm trying to find an example. So if you are a guest on a podcast and their show is smaller, but let's say you do Facebook ads and their audience wants to grow their lead magnets, their email list, they do launches, and this person is serving them in a way of doing content. So maybe you could, again, borrow their audience and also work with their clients. So maybe you guys can collaborate in different ways, refer each other. Maybe you can speak in front of their community or their membership base. So you also have to think about what other opportunities are beyond the interview. And is their audience, yes, but also is their community, their membership base, their clients aligned with what you do, and you guys can like help each other out. There's synergy there, right? So these are the things that you want to think about before you DIY your searches and your pitches. Now, another great option, and I do love this one, I have to say, is looking to podcast guest directories and matchmaking services. So these platforms let you list yourself as a guest, and some of them will actually connect you with hosts that are looking for experts. So kind of like a dating app, right? They match you up. But they all work a little bit differently. They all have slightly different features and benefits. So you really want to look at that. Some have directories with searching ability and keywords. Some are free, some you pay for. Some are robust and they have communities and resources. They actually match you up with hosts using specific criteria, like a database in the back end and AI. And so they actually pitch you on potential shows within their software, and some allow you to communicate directly and book the interview right within the app, which is really cool. Some you have like a profile that you can create. Some are pretty skinny, so to speak, and some, again, are more elaborate. And some compile the data on the hosts and the shows and give you more detailed information about the shows, like their downloads, who they serve, how long they've been podcasting, how many episodes they have. So again, they're all a little bit different, but it will save you so much time going to those directories and services versus doing all that research yourself or having your VA do it as well. So I'm going to rhyme some off. Obviously, the links are going to be in the show notes, but I will give you some of the URLs right here. So one is matchmaker.fm. One is podmatch.com. One is podcastguests.com, talks.co, podcasthawk.com, pitchdb.com, and podchaser.com. I'm sure there's other out there. This is in no specific order. I have played with some of them. Some of them I don't know anything about. So, do your own due diligence and check them out. But some great resources to get some shows to be booked on. Lastly, you can also cut to the chase, save even more time, and use a podcast booking service. This is more of a paid, done-for-you approach. These agencies do all the research, the outreach, the follow-ups. Some create your one sheet and strategize about your topics, what types of podcasts would be better to guest on based on the audience and your business goals. Some work with just podcasts. Some also book for speakers and stages. And I'm going to give out a shout out to some of the agencies that I know. Oh, and some of them are very specific on what industry that they work with. So that's always good to know. So again, these links are going to be in the show notes. I will rhyme off some right now. So interviewvalet.com, yourexpertguest.com, interviewconnections.com, podcastconnections.co, accessspeakers.biz, wellnessproductionsco.com, outlieraudio.com, podcastbookers.com, guestexpertsonair.com, podvantage.ai. Again, no specific order. And yeah, go check them out for sure. Side note, some PR companies also book you on podcasts. I happen to know tailsplash.com, that's TALE, just as an example. So how do you choose a podcast booking agency? So you definitely want to do your due diligence. You definitely want to interview them, so to speak, and ask them a lot of questions because they are all built differently. They're not one size fits all. They're all very different and unique in their own way. So here is a bunch of questions that you can ask them to kind of narrow it down so that you make sure that they fit your needs, right? So first you want to ask about their experience and their expertise, right? What kind of clients do they typically work with? Are they familiar with experts in energy healing or coaching? The more they know your industry, the better. You know, can they share case studies or testimonials from past clients? Do they have experience booking guests in your niche? So I would definitely, again, if you can find one that really understands your niche, I think that is just easier to kind of like target for yourself, right? Podcast selection and quality. So ask them how they select the podcast to pitch them on. Do they focus on high quality or relevant shows? What criteria do they use to determine if their podcast is a good fit? Are they looking for audience size, engagement, alignment, all of the above? Do they guarantee a certain amount of bookings? You know, some of them do offer a minimum number of bookings in their package. They all bill differently, right? They have different services. Do they craft the pitches? Do they customize the pitches or use a one-size-fits-all template? I think that's a really important question. Do you, as the guest, have final approval before they send pitches? So do you get to yay or nay before that? Or do you get a voice in how that messaging comes across? Do they track the outreach and results, or do you have to? Do they have a dashboard that they use? Do they report back to you? Do you have regular meetings? What are their pricing packages? What does it include? Some charge per booking, some have monthly retainers. Again, they're all super different, right? Are there any additional costs, or do they have any additional programs above and beyond the booking? Do they have media training? Do they have pitch refinement? Do they review your interviews afterwards and give you feedback? So just kind of knowing what other add-on services that they offer, I think is really important. Do they have a cancellation policy? Can you pause the service, or what kind of agreement is in place? Do they offer the media training or coaching for their interviews? Do they provide any marketing support, such as repurposing? Do they help with relationship building after the interview? So you really have to understand from beginning to end what role they play and how they work. So that way you know exactly what you're getting, you know exactly what your responsibilities are, and you know that you're going to get booked on the right shows so that you can fulfill your goals. every podcaster, every guest has different goals, different expertise, different approach. So, for all of you out there that are looking to get on podcasts this year and guest more, I hope this episode was super helpful. Kind of just get a breakdown of what your options are, some of the resources, and some of the questions that you can ask to do your due diligence and make sure that you get more ROI out of the experience. So, until next week, folks, we will see you on the Leverage Your Podcast show. Ciao.